So I decided that the title of this video was going to be the best LUTs I've ever used, and that's not an exaggeration. They actually are the best LUTs I've ever used. I've spent tons of money on different LUTs, even film convert, dehancer, just different plugins for color grading. If you don't know already about the LUTs I'm talking about, they're the Phantom Luts. On this channel, I will never back anything that I don't firmly believe in, and Joel reached out to me about becoming an affiliate, and I easily said yes because I was already telling my friends about the LUTs anyways, and they were making my friends' lives easier. So I'm hoping if you've never heard about these LUTs that you end up trying them, because I can almost guarantee you that they'll make your life easier. In this video, I'm gonna go over the many different reasons why the Phantom LUTs are my LUT of choice for post-production. You're gonna see many of the projects that I've done over the years that were graded with these LUTs. And I'm gonna touch on one specific reason that I don't hear talked about too much that has saved me hours and hours in post-production. So if you're curious at all, stick to the end of the video to find out. I have Joel on the line, and he's gonna be the one to share why they were created in the first place and what the LUTs are meant for. He'd do a much better job than me, so let's get into it.
Okay, so I actually never intended to sell them. I never intended them to be something that other people used. I initially made them for myself back 4+ years ago when I used to shoot on the older generation of Sonys. The old sensors were a lot noisier and the colors were a lot more challenging to work with. So I made them initially just to solve my own problem. My problem was that I couldn't afford a Blackmagic Ursa Mini, which is what I wanted at the time, because the colors always seemed to look great right out of the box. So I ended up at the time getting an FS5, I think. And I was stuck with the image out of the camera, so I started tinkering and developing my own looks. And I used to post a lot online, just getting feedback or talking about a certain lens combination. I used to shoot anamorphic, so I was always very active in Facebook groups, Reddit groups. And through my constant posting, people started asking me, you know, what LUT are you using? How are you getting that look out of an FS5? And I just said, it's a LUT I made. Innocently, and they're like, do you sell it? And I'm like, sure. So it just kind of happened completely organically.
So your LUTs actually emulate the Arri Mira. How did you even start emulating that? That's obviously an expensive camera, so how did that come about?
Yeah, so initially I was making film LUTs. That was the first, my first foray into making LUTs was I was trying to create, you know, the filmic look. And then I realized, like, sometimes the film looks quite heavy-handed, and again, it always starts with me. So I myself didn't always want to use that higher contrast, that rich filmic look. And I was like, well, the best, more neutral option is like the Arri Alexa. So I actually bought an Arri Mira at the end of 2019, so just before COVID. I got a deal on one and basically spent all the money I had taking a risk. Bought it from China for like a lower price, and the guy was like, it's got a great sensor, it's in good condition. I'm like, I hope I'm not being scammed. So I bought the camera, and that's when I really started getting serious about emulating the Arri. And so I got the Amira, and I still had my FS7 at that time. And I genuinely was like, sometimes I wanted to use both cameras or one or the other, depending on budget. So I kept the FS7, and I'm like, well, let me I own both cameras. I got all the time in the world. So in my spare time, I was building a LUT, and it took a lot of iterations. Like, it was quite a involved process. Like, the Alexa color science is unlike any other color science from any other camera that I've tinkered with or played with. So yeah, it just was like non-stop shooting test footage, and then and it's sort of an obsession. Like, I'm an obsessive kind of guy. So I'm the right guy for the job. Yeah. Because like I still to this day, I still every now and then encounter things. I've pretty much mapped it out now. Like, I've got the Alexa color science as far as I'm concerned, very well understood. But there are still little things where I'm like, why does it do that? And then I'll go in and I got to find out. I got to get that answer.
Yeah, I've noticed that you've done a couple iterations even since I first owned the Phantom Luts, which is about like 2.5, 3 years ago. I think you've done like 5 iterations of just the Sony one. Like, I don't even know about the other ones. And I'm like, like every 5 or 6 months, it's like, hey, here's a free update for your LUTs. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And then I already thought they looked great. And then out of nowhere, I'm like, oh, they look better. I'm like, wait, So I'm like, so how good is it? I'm like, how good can it get? You know, like every time it gets better. But
Yeah.
so at this point, when you got the Amira, you were a full working DP, and you essentially created these LUTs for yourself.
So I tend to buy most of the cameras, not all of them, but most of them that I make LUTs for, because I want to be the end user, and I still shoot a lot. So I'm shot like 5 times this week already.
Yeah.
So I'm always using my own gear, using my own LUTs, and stress testing them always, and always open to feedback, because I'm the end user, which I think helps, because
that's huge.
that gives me that's my north. My true north is like, well, do I like the LUT? Like, I'm just about to release a new LUT, actually. I haven't announced this yet, but here's my first announcement. I'm going to release a new LUT, a 6th LUT for the Arri pack, just a complimentary LUT, because I've been using it a lot myself, and I've developed a look that's filled a gap for me. I'm like, I really want a LUT that does this, this, this. And then I'm like, hey, I think that everyone would like this, so I'm going to release it. Because I want you guys I want you to share with me. I just love making beautiful things. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of my fundamental instincts. And I made a LUT that I think is beautiful. I'm like, I don't want to keep it to myself. I want everyone else to use it. So we can like share.
But
so
I mean,
that's coming soon,
that's
actually.
huge. Like, so that's huge, because I see a bunch of LUT packs, and honestly, I'm like tempted to make LUT packs, because you could, it's a indispensable digital asset, you know? Like, you make it once and it goes, but I think it says a lot when you're an actual DP, you're an actual cinematographer, you work in post, you color grade, and you do all that stuff, and it's not just like, just did this little orange and teal thing, and then it ended up being cool, and I ended up selling my LUTs for like $20 that I worked a couple hours on. You know, this is something that you've been doing over years, and not just, hey, I like my look, let me export a LUT and put it on my website for $20. You know,
it's so funny, because, like I said, it was just, I was so frustrated with, you know, my S-Log footage. Like, it was such a hassle, and I couldn't believe Sony kind of just, it felt like they gave us something half-baked. It's like, here you go, figure it out, you know. And it was like, why doesn't it look, I don't understand, like, what their philosophy is. So my philosophy was to have a convenient, like a fix, just like, hey, like, you want autofocus, Sony's got you covered. They've got autofocus. You want full frame, they got you covered. You want color? Sorry, we don't help. We don't really care about our color. So I'm like, all right, well, I have to solve that problem myself. And then that was pre A7S III FX6, which I see as the second wave. Like, so the Sony Venice, A7S III FX6, FX9, etc. That's like the second wave where Sony did get their color is better. It's still very clinical in my opinion, but pre that was like the dark times. And that's when I sort of
dark ages.
That's the dark ages pre-Sony, when Sony, no one wanted to shoot Sony, like they were not as popular. The green, the noise, it was so noisy, and that's when I was trapped there because I didn't have any money. So I like had Sony was more affordable. So that's where I sort of made my bones, or that's where I made my reputation, I guess. And a lot of Sony, by the time the new age started, a lot of Sony users from the dark ages were using my LUTs, and then so when the new Sonys came, they became really popular, and a lot of people are leaving Canon, leaving all different kind of brands to come to Sony because of the functionality.
That's what happened with me.
Yeah, and so I then was luckily in the right place at the right time, where I was like, everyone's like, oh, what LUTs does everyone use? Like, Joel Famularo. So,
I mean, that's how I found out about Phantom LUTs. Like, I came from Canon colors, and I don't think Canon colors are perfect, but I was really happy with what I was getting out of the camera and just my own personal color grading workflow. But then I switched to Sony, and nothing against Sony. I didn't really like what was coming out of camera, and I had the A7S III, so it was, I guess, the new wave or whatever you want to call it. But I still wasn't happy. So for me, I wanted a neutral starting point. So ironically, I purchased the Phantom LUTs, and now I don't just use it as a neutral starting point. I use the film emulation LUTs more than even the Arri ones, me personally. So it ended up working out really interestingly, and I've been using them ever since. So I thankfully switched to Panasonic at probably the perfect time, because one of my reasons this is kind of weird, but when I was leaving Sony and going back to Canon, because I wanted the C70, I just wanted internal NDs and just a different image, and I had the Komodo, so it's a whole thing with the RF system. So when I was switching to Canon, I was sad about leaving Sony because I couldn't use the Phantom Luts anymore, which is like, to me, like, actually being a working professional, that was like sad to me. I was like, why am I sad about leaving a whole system because I can't use a LUT? But they actually became such a, oh, I'm serious, I'm not even trying to sell these things, like they became such a critical part of my post-production workflow. And then shortly after switching to Canon, the Canon LUTs, the Canon Phantom LUTs came out, and I'm like, oh, thank God. Then the Red Komodo LUTs came out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like God hears me, you know, like this is amazing. And but jokes aside, I actually switched to Panasonic, and I was like, whatever, like I got it as a gimbal cam anyways, but I switched to the S5 II, and then probably a week after or something like that, you had the LUTs, like the Vlog LUTs, or or actually no.
It feels like I'm following you around.
Yeah,
it's actually a coincidence.
You're following me, and then I started a YouTube channel, and you're right there. But I was super excited, and something I'll go into later on in the video, the fact that I had a LUT specifically for each one of the cameras that I had. That actually gave me a lot of flexibility to use different cameras. I didn't feel like I needed to stick with Canon or I needed to stick with Sony. So that was actually super insightful. I've been using your LUTs for a couple years, and I feel like I learned some things. So thank you so much, Joel, for coming on the channel. And yeah, is there anything else you want to add?
No, man, I think we covered it all. So thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure, and talk to you soon, man.
So that interview was a little longer than I expected, but there are tons of valuable information regarding the LUTs and just post-production workflow and color matching in general. There are a lot of things that I'm going to be referencing to in the rest of this video. In case you didn't want to watch the whole thing, there are going to be timestamps with specific topics that we talked about. I'm going to keep this next part brief. It's just going to be my opinion, as well as sample footage, some different tests that I did, and that specific reason that saved me hours of time. So let's get into it. Well, that was a little low, but to make this short and sweet regarding the look, they do look incredible. They give you this soft filmic highlight roll off that when I use simple conversion LUTs, they're super crunchy, and I end up taking the contrast out anyways, but it gives my footage a certain curve, and I know they're emulating the Alexa, so that's why this happens, but it does something that I just wasn't able to do well, or if I did end up achieving that, I would have to specifically do it for each and every camera, and that would take so much time. It amazes me how on every project, I just slap the LUT on, and it looks good right off the bat. I'm gonna be very clear right from the beginning, these aren't just a one and done LUT. No LUT that has ever been created is that. So if you are looking into a LUT to completely solve all your color grading problems, that's just not going to happen. You have to white balance, you have to just do some color correction, exposure shifts, or anything like that to get the LUT to function properly. But it's super easy. Every time I use the LUT, I'm like, oh man, it looks good right off the bat. It's just super simple. I haven't used a LUT that was this easy to use and looked this good with hardly any work. I had a mini confession that I had towards the end of the video about how I was sad / frustrated that I wasn't able to use Phantom LUTs when I switched from Sony to Canon. Thankfully, Joel made them for the Canon system as well. But to think that a LUT has become such a crucial part of my post-production workflow that I'd be sad to switch to a completely different system because of that says a lot. I was almost embarrassed to say that because I am a working professional and I do this for a living. They've just integrated themselves into my workflow so much so that I was disappointed, and thankfully he does have them for other systems, so I use them on every single camera system that I have now. So I'm not going to go into each and every different LUT that's in the LUT pack. There's an Arri one and there's a film LUT pack, but you can buy them together, which I highly advise to do because it just comes out a lot cheaper. One thing that I really enjoyed was that he also has different looks with the Arri pack. He has like tungsten. I actually don't know how to explain tungsten, but it looks really good. I'll show you some examples. There's Jamaica, which is a more warm, almost looks film-like. There's Utopia, which is like a slight orange and teal. There's an ice blue, which is blue. essentially. And the ones that I'm really excited about, even though I use the Arri ones all the time, are the film emulations. I didn't think I was gonna like these as much as I do, but I've used them on every single YouTube video that you guys watched. This talking head is graded actually with the Eastman, the remastered version. I 100% grade on top of these though. I balance colors a little differently sometimes, but the film emulation just looks really, really, really good. If you are interested in purchasing them, the links are below. I do get a kickback and it does support the channel, but that's not why I'm making this video. I was gonna make this video anyways, even if Joel didn't reach out to me, because I just know these LUTs would be helpful to a lot of people. But the second reason is the fact that these LUTs save me so much time. As I've said time and time again, editing is one of my least favorite parts in video production, and these LUTs just make it easier. Color grading is actually my favorite part, but these LUTs just make it easier. They give me such a good starting point that when I do grade on top of them, everything just looks better than if I were to do it myself. Yes, I have the skills and experience to grade a beautiful image and all of that, but these LUTs just save me time. They get me anywhere from 70 to 80% there, and then the rest of my job with color grading is a lot more simple. Another way that these LUTs save me so much time, and this is the one I don't hear talked about as much, is it is so much easier to match my cameras using these LUTs. My S5 II with my C70 with my Komodo match almost perfectly with just slapping the LUT on and doing some color correction, because each camera reads white balance a little differently, and when you're running gun you really can't custom white balance everything, but just slapping the LUT on saves me at least an hour per project when I'm using two different systems of cameras. What this also does, which I never thought a LUT would do this, is that it gives me the freedom to choose different camera systems. I talk about this a little bit in the interview, so I do encourage you to go back and watch that. But I don't know if you've experienced this, if you're shooting with one system, but the camera that you want as your B cam is on a completely different system. I've experienced this many times. When I purchased the S5 II, I knew that was gonna be a hassle for me. I knew that was gonna take a lot more time to match my cameras in post. I did have Cine Match, but that sometimes is a hassle to use. When I found out that Joel made LUTs for the Panasonic system, it was such a relief for me because I knew I could match my cameras a lot quicker and a lot easier. If you are a working professional, you understand how important this is. So color matching cameras is a huge benefit of the Phantom Luts. And that's pretty much all I'm gonna say about the Phantom Luts. You've seen sample footage, you've heard my opinions, Joel's story with how Phantom Luts even started. But if you're hesitant at all, I'm pretty sure there's a 15% off coupon on the website right now that you can use. You know, I'm actually curious if anyone's had a bad experience with Phantom Luts. I've personally never heard anybody that has, so if you have, comment down below. If you haven't, also comment down below so YouTube can push this video. Subscribe if it's helped you, like it, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'll see you in the next one.